Thank you, everyone. Please have a seat. If you are satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant caused the death of Lynn Hernan with the intent to kill, you should find the defendant guilty of first-degree intentional homicide. If you are not so satisfied, you must find the defendant not guilty.
Lynn Hernan's not here to tell you what went on.
We were dispatched to a suicide. A female had located her friend deceased in a residence.
It was immediately obvious that the decedent was there in a recliner. She has multiple medication bottles that are within arm's reach. She has multiple medications that are kind of scattered on her carpet, and this appears to be an unknown powdery substance left behind on a plate.
I received a witness statement from Jessy. From what I knew, Jessy was the caretaker of the individual.
Jessy Kurczewski took care of Lynn during the last year of Lynn's life. Jessy was like an adopted daughter to Lynn, so Jessy and Lynn were very close.
Lynn was really sick and depressed.
Lynn started suffering from health issues that were unexplained. She was going in and out of the hospital, but doctors couldn't figure out what it was that was ailing Lynn.
She was going to like doctor after doctor, and then she'd call me and say they can't find anything wrong with me.
The defense argued that Lynn wanted to die by suicide because she was sick of being sick.
I remember hearing it from Jessy on the phone. Looks like Lynn, committed suicide.
When you heard your Auntie Lenny died by suicide, did you believe that?
I wasn't really sure at the time what to believe because, I just couldn't see her, ending her own life.
She wants to die. She doesn't like life.
The speculation at the time on law enforcement's behalf was that this was clearly a suicide.
You received information from the medical examiner. Did that cause the sheriff's office to change their investigation?
Yes.
There was a substance that was unusual.
The medical examiner found tetrahydrozoline in Lynn Hernan's system. It's the active ingredient in eye drops that, when ingested, can be fatal.
My opinion is that Lynn Hernan died of tetrahydrozoline poisoning.
What about the manner of death in this case?
It's homicide.
What killed her is the eye drops.
Are you serious? Do you guys think I murdered her?
Did you?
I swear to God I didn't.
In June of 2021, Jessy Kurczewski was charged with first-degree intentional homicide. The state argued that Lynn Hernan was worth more dead than alive to Jessy Kurczewski.
You're going to see that the access Ms. Kurczewski had to Lynn Hernan allowed her to steal every dollar almost that Lynn Hernan was worth in life.
Lynn gave Jessy money all the time because she wanted to. She wanted Jessy to have it.
And this is not a suicide. This was intentional homicide.
Lynn loved Jessy. If Lynn Hernan was here today, she would say, "Are you crazy, prosecution? Jessy's innocent."
This case must be decided by you, the jurors, based on the evidence presented in the courtroom. You, jurors, are the judges of the credibility of the witnesses and the weight of the evidence.
In October of 2023, in the courtroom of Judge Jennifer Doro, 39-year-old Jessy Kurczewski went on trial for the intentional homicide of 62-year-old Lynn Hernan. along with 2 counts of felony theft for stealing from Lynn, someone who'd always thought of Jessy as a beloved friend. 5 years earlier, Jessy called police and told them she found Lynn dead, sitting in her recliner in the living room of her Pewaukee, Wisconsin condo. Jessy had been taking care of Lynn, who had serious medical problems.
The lawyers will now make their opening statements.
Good afternoon, everyone.
The prosecutors for Waukesha County are Deputy District Attorney Abby Nicolai and Assistant District Attorneys J.J. Crawford and Randy Sitzberger.
So this is Wisconsin versus Jessy Kurczewski. Said otherwise, this is a case of murder, greed, and lies. You're going to see that in or about October 3rd, 2018, Lynn Hernon became worth more dead than alive to Jessy Kurczewski.
Prosecutors told the jury that this case was about someone who wanted money.
Stephanie Rodriguez covered the trial for the CBS affiliate in Milwaukee.
And prosecutors said that that's why she was caring for her, not because she genuinely cared, but that Jessy wanted the money in her bank account.
Between January of 16 and October 3rd of 2018, Ms. Kurczewski was able to steal $144,000 plus from Lynn Hernon while she was still alive.
And then she wanted Lynn dead to get the money from her estate.
Lynn Hernon was dead at only 62 years old from a tetrahydrozoline poisoning after the defendant gave her a bottle laced with Visine eye drops to drink.
But the defense presented Jessy as a close friend who took care of Lynn, who they claimed was depressed about her declining health.
This case is extremely important to Jessy. Presumed innocent. And don't ever let that thought leave your mind, that she's presumed innocent.
At trial, Jessy was represented by defense attorneys Pablo Galaviz and Donna Kugler.
Here's a picture of Lynn and Jessy, a graduation party that Lynn threw for Jessy, high school.
At the mention of her close relationship with Lynn,
this is my daughter, she's so proud.
Jessy immediately teared up.
That's who Jessy is to Lynn, her daughter.
Jessy had known Lynn since childhood through her mother, Jennifer Flower.
Jennifer's like her best friend, and Jessy became her best friend.
Lynn, who worked most of her life as a hairdresser, never married and lived alone. Then, in the 2 years before her death, her health rapidly declined.
There were times where Lynn would fall in her home and Jessy would have to go and help her get up.
Lynn also had lung disease, high blood pressure, and severe gastrointestinal issues, which doctors were never able to fully diagnose. She had been in and out of the hospital several times in the year before she died.
Jessy was always with Lynn because she became her full-time caretaker, essentially. Jessy would do the grocery shopping for Lynn. Jessy paid Lynn's bills.
Jessy was the only person she trusted.
The defense told the jury that as Lynn's health further deteriorated, she became despondent.
And you saw the way she was done up with the hair and nails and jewelry. She didn't look like that anymore. She didn't want any more visitors because she didn't look, in her mind, the same.
The defense argued that on October 3rd of 2018, Lynn was tired of being sick and decided to take her own life.
When they arrived on the scene, this is what they found at the scene. They found a lot of empty prescription bottles. And they can't see that as a suicide? She's innocent. Find her not guilty.
One of the first orders of business for prosecutors,
The state would next call Tabitha Kukis.
was to establish the cause of death. Former Waukesha County Deputy Medical Examiner Tabitha Kukis talked to jurors about those pictures she took when she arrived at Lynn's condo.
This is a close-up of the medication bottles that were directly to her left. There's additional medications that are present, some without their caps on.
Kukis had photographed multiple medications scattered on the carpet, as well as a white powder on a plate and on Hernon's chest. Defense attorney Kugler suggests the powder was spilled by Lynn herself.
Jessy told you it was common for Lynn to crush medications because of her problem swallowing.
That's what she told me.
Jurors heard from Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Linda Biedritsky, who testified about those photos taken in Lynn's living room. She said the pills and powder scattered at the scene did point to a potential suicide.
There was a thought that maybe there was an ingestion was a possibility for the cause of death.
But before pronouncing the cause of death, Dr. Biedritsky waited to see the results from the toxicology tests. When she received them weeks later, she was in for a surprise.
There was a substance that I was an unusual finding that I hadn't seen in a report from their facility before. It was called tetrahydrozoline.
Dr. Biedritsky began her own research on tetrahydrozoline, a drug found in some over-the-counter eye drops.
This is a substance that I haven't seen in a toxicology report before. It's not supposed to be in the blood.
But how did it get there?
Dr. Biedritsky, were you involved in the cause of death and manner determination for Lynn Hernon?
Yes.
Medical examiner Dr. Linda Biedritsky told the jury it was in late September 2019, almost a year after Lynn Hernon's death, that she published her official conclusion about how Lynn died.
The cause of death I determined was tetrahydrozoline poisoning.
And Dr. Biedritsky ruled that Lynn did not deliberately drink a fatal dose of eye drops.
How this injury occurred is that she was given tetrahydrozoline by another, which is why I called it a homicide.
The belief that Lynn Hernon was given tetrahydrozoline by another shows that she was given this unsuspectingly. She didn't know that she was ingesting tetrahydrozoline when she did it.
The defense challenged the medical examiner's findings.
These are all the drugs that were found in Ms. Hernon, right?
Correct.
Toxicology reports showed that Lynn had at least 8 prescription drugs in her system, some of which Lynn was not supposed to be taking at the time because those medications had been discontinued by Lynn's doctors.
And these were all in her blood, which means they've already been ingested and made it into the bloodstream.
True.
Dr. Biedritsky said that in her determination, those medications, along with some of Lynn's medical conditions, contributed to but did not cause Lynn's death.
The medications found in Lynn's body were all at therapeutic levels.
Your conclusion was that she died from the tetrahydrozoline, right?
Yes.
But the defense asked, how could the medical examiner be so certain Lynn did not ingest the eye drops on her own?
You don't know, as you sit there today, whether she voluntarily ingested that.
It was my opinion she didn't, but knowledge of her action, no.
Well, you weren't there.
I wasn't there.
On redirect, Deputy DA Nikolai asked about the powder found on and near Lynn's body.
What do you think happened?
I think that they may have been deposited there.
The medical examiner believed that Lynn Hernon's body was staged to look like an overdose because toxicology reports showed that none of the crushed up medication that was found on Lynn Hernon and next to her was actually in her system.
The following day,
State may call your next witness.
the jury heard from some of Lynn's friends.
Did you know Lynn Hernon?
Yes, I did.
Jim Kelleher met Lynn at a music festival in 1983 when she was 27.
What was your first impression?
That lady that looked that good wouldn't go out with me.
But Lynn said yes, and their romantic relationship lasted 10 years. Even after it ended, they remained close friends.
Lynn was a beautiful lady. Inside and out, she was beautiful.
Jim says he never met Jessy until right after Lynn died.
I get a phone call from Jessy, and she says, I have some bad news. Lynn committed suicide. And by the way, we're going to have a dinner for her on the 13th at the Open Flame restaurant.
She said, in one sentence,
Correct.
Your dear friend died by suicide.
Right.
The next sentence, she tells you there's going to be a dinner in her memory.
Right.
What did you make of that?
Well, I kind of didn't believe her right off the bat. She wasn't crying.
On the stand, Jim said he didn't believe Lynn would have taken her own life.
Did you ever hear Lynn say anything to you about thinking of killing herself?
No, I did not. She never gave me the indication of suicidal. Never.
He said that despite her growing frustration with her health problems, Lynn would still visit him and his girlfriend at their home.
So she'd bring treats and stuff. She would say she does stomach aches or whatever, and she would always leave.
But the defense questioned whether Jim really knew much about Lynn's health struggles. In the last year of Lynn's life, she'd been in and out of the hospital, discharged the final time just 5 days before her death.
Did you offer to go over there and take care of our cat when she was in the hospital?
No, I did not.
You didn't go visit her when she...
No, I did not.
Prosecutors also called Corrine Poza.
We were best friends for about 35 plus years.
And Corrine's son, Anthony, who says he always had a special bond with Lynn since childhood.
What did you call Lynn?
Auntie Lenny.
Anthony says he stayed close to Lynn, regularly dropping by her condo while he attended college nearby.
I loved doing stuff with her, thrift store shopping. It was a date we would go on, is go thrift store shopping.
Do you recall when the last conversation you had with Lynn was?
The last time I saw Lynn was a month before she passed away.
Anthony testified that despite her medical troubles, Lynn appeared to be improving.
She said she was starting to feel better, and she's like, I'm fine, I'm glad I'm getting out again, and we need to do this more often.
Prosecutors asked Waukesha County Sheriff's Detective Chris Cole about his investigation into Lynn's death.
Did you speak with Ms. Kurczewski in regard to this death investigation?
Yes. She contacted our office looking for an update.
Prosecutors introduced video of that meeting with Detective Cole. He testified that 5 months after Lynn died, before the medical examiner had ruled on the cause of death, Jessy came to the sheriff's department with her mother, Jennifer Flower, asking questions.
When I talked to the medical examiner last, I talked to them numerous times, and they said I had to contact you guys. They kind of weren't sure. We didn't know if it was a suicide or if it was something medical.
So at this point, they're waiting for their secondary, the confirming test.
During that interview, Detective Cole found out more about Jessy's relationship with Lynn.
So she was like an aunt, a second mom to me. She didn't have kids.
You've known her your whole life. Yeah. And that's why you were helping her out.
Yeah.
Jessy said she was just about the only person still in Lynn's life before she died.
She pretty much blew everybody off hospital at the end. She said, no, I don't want to see anybody.
According to Jessy and her mother, Lynn was so withdrawn she did not want to talk to her friend Jim when he called.
She said, do not tell him I don't want him here. I don't want to see him. She didn't like the way she looked, so she didn't want people around.
But that's not how Jim remembers what happened when he and his girlfriend called Lynn's number.
Well, this girl answered the phone, and she was kind of mouthing off to us. Don't use this phone. Don't call this number ever again. Don't worry about Lynn.
And you're thinking what?
I'm going to find out from Lynn what's going on.
A few days later, Jim says Lynn called him from the hospital, and they agreed to make plans to get together when she went home.
And that's the last time that I heard Lynn's voice.
As they tried to make sense of her death, Lynn's friends say they recalled Lynn talking about something else that was troubling her, something that had nothing to do with her health.
She would talk about her money. It's disappearing.
She just said, I don't know what's happening to my money.
How do you think Lynn Hernan died? Chat now with the 48 Hours team on Facebook and X.
Did Ms. Kurczewski tell you who would be in charge of handling Lynn's estate?
Yeah, she said she was appointed power of attorney.
Okay.
As the prosecution turned to the charges that Jessy stole money from Lynn, they asked Anthony Poza about his communications with Jessy and the months after Lynn's death.
I would just check up with Jessy every once in a while via text and ask her if she needed any help.
Lynn left a will she had drawn up in 2016, which named Jessy as personal representative, Wisconsin's equivalent of an executor. Jessy and Anthony were co-beneficiaries. When Jessy sent Anthony some paperwork of accounts she was settling,
I just remember getting a final account with just a bunch of credit card bills.
he was surprised at the amount of money Lynn appeared to owe.
And it was just weird how she had all these debts that just didn't make any sense to me.
Lynn's friends remembered her as living paycheck to paycheck until 2014, when she inherited $250,000 after her mother died. Now, after Lynn's death, Jessy reported to Anthony that most of Lynn's assets had been eaten away by debt.
I just felt like something was up and I wanted it looked at more closely.
The jury next heard from someone who was looking more closely.
You went through all these financial accounts sort of line by line, is that correct?
Yes.
Detective Nathan Plennis testified about the investigation into Lynn's finances. Prosecutors alleged Jessy stole more than $200,000 from Lynn before and after she died. And in the course of their investigation, detectives discovered a bombshell. Jessy Kurczewski had a criminal record. Back in 2011, Jessy was convicted on charges of identity theft and forgery and sentenced to 8 years. Jessy had been released from prison early in 2016 on extended supervision, which coincided with the time Lynn's health began to decline.
Can you just scroll down to page 3?
Plennis told jurors what he learned about Lynn Hernan's bank accounts. He testified that Lynn's money market account, which had around $250,000 in 2016, was down to only $87 just after she died. A fraction of the total was spent by Lynn on a Jeep and some jewelry. Almost everything else, including a total of 20 checks,
$9,135.62.
went to Jessy Kurczewski.
2 checks, March 13th, $7,330.80, $9,416.
Jessy was accused of stealing from Lynn because she was getting 20 checks out of Lynn Hernan's account with varying things in the memo notes like IRS payment, car payment.
Stephanie Rodriguez covered the trial for the CBS affiliate in Milwaukee.
But none of the money was going to the places where Lynn supposedly intended for them to go.
Plennis described to the jury how he matched each of those checks to deposits in Jessy's accounts and then tracked where Jessy spent that money. There was a big spike in spending while Lynn was in the hospital 2 weeks before she died.
During her last hospital stay, money was being transferred from Lynn's account into Jessy's account, and then Jessy was withdrawing that money from ATMs at a local casino.
Plennis also testified that on the day that Lynn died, a JCPenney credit card was opened in Lynn's name. Just days later, a $3,000 purchase of furniture made on another credit card in Lynn's name was delivered to the home Jessy shared with Scott Craig.
Mr. Craig, how is it you know Ms. Kurczewski?
We were boyfriend and girlfriend for 3.5 years.
What was it that happened in the summer of 2019 that caused that end to the relationship?
When Waukesha Sheriff's Department came to my house and took her away.
Jessy was arrested for potentially violating the terms of her supervised release on those identity theft and fraud charges.
This is the initial interview that was conducted with Ms. Kurczewski once the warrants were conducted on July 9th.
Detective Aaron Hoppy, the lead investigator in the case, and Detective Chris Cole interviewed Jessy. Hoppy watched portions of that interview along with the jurors.
Typically, would you go there the morning or the night? Or
I didn't have a set. It just depended how she was doing the day before.
Following up on their suspicions that Jessy had been stealing from Lynn, Detective Chris Cole gave her a chance to explain. She claimed Lynn had been paying her for helping at home.
Did you have an official arrangement that I make $20 an hour?
No, there was nothing. No, nothing like that. I I mean, there was no, you know, one day, oh, here's the check, one day, here's my card, go get this, one day, I mean, it was no set.
No set amount?
No. I mean, she'd help out, or she'd help my mom, oh, this month I'm going to pay rent, or I'm going to pay your car.
Jurors watched as Detective Cole, for the first time, shared Lynn's autopsy results with Jessy.
There's an anomaly in her toxicology. There's a drug in her system that's not supposed to be there.
And what would that be?
It's called tetrahydrazine.
What is that?
Commonly known as eye drops.
She uses eye drops all the time.
What does she use them for?
She uses them for her eyes. She put them in her eyes all the time.
What killed her is the eye drops.
Are you serious?
In the interview, Detective Cole told Jessy that the medical examiner thought someone gave the eye drops to Lynn orally in an attempt to kill her.
Do you guys think I murdered her?
Did you?
I swear to God, I couldn't.
You seem to have the most to gain on this.
I have no reason to murder her. I didn't give her anything. I didn't give her this eye drop or whatever it's called.
But detectives say Jessy knew all about tetrahydrozoline. She told her boyfriend Scott in text messages someone had put it in her drink when she was at a bar about 3 months after Lynn's death. Detective Hoppy read the texts in court.
Jessy to Scott. Scott, I don't feel good.
Scott told detectives that Jessy said she went to the hospital.
They said my blood pressure is really bad. I have traces of tetrahydrozoline in my blood. The doctor said that's the main ingredient in eye drops. He said that people put it in people's drinks all the time. He said there's no taste to it and people don't notice.
Jessy also tells Scott in those text messages that people can die from tetrahydrozoline poisoning.
Detective Hoppy, I think you testified you spoke again with Ms. Kurczewski.
That's right.
On day 9 of the trial, the jury watched video of another interview between Jessy and detectives. This one took place the day after she was arrested on that parole hold. She had asked to speak to detectives again.
I was up all night long trying to think of everything and anything. I was thinking of the Visines.
After spending her first night in jail, Jessy's clothing had changed, and so had her story. Right after her arrest, Jessy had told detectives that Lynn used eye drops for dry eyes. Now, Jessy told Detective Hoppy that Lynn had another use for it.
She was drinking vodka and Visine.
During the second day of interviews with detectives, the jury heard Jessy tell them that Lynn did drink Visine.
How do you know she had mixed Visine with her vodka?
Because that's what she did. She's done it about 3 times.
Why didn't you tell us that yesterday?
Because I didn't want to tell you guys, because you guys are making it sound like it happened the day of, and that's not when she was doing that.
But Jessy says she never gave Lynn Hernan any Visine.
You never put the vodka in her Visine in her vodka. So she put Visine in her vodka.
Then Jessy went further.
Jessy goes into detail about how Lynn wanted to die by suicide, that Lynn was using the eye drops to help her die by suicide.
She was looking for her way out.
Jessy vehemently denied helping Lynn die.
I never mixed it. I swear to God, I bought it for her, and I knew she was mixing it. She put it in her water once in a while and in her vodka once in a while.
The following day, Jessy asked to speak with the detectives yet again, the third time in 3 days. The jury watched as Jessy had a new revelation for the investigators.
Jessy tells detectives that Lynn would get a buzz off of drinking Visine.
She said she lost, feeling of her body. It made her feel good. And I honestly, she was doing it for so long that I didn't think she was going to die from it. I really didn't. I thought, okay, she's getting some sleep from it, that's it. She was doing it for 2 months at least.
Doing what?
The Visine.
And Jessy now said that Lynn actually did drink Visine the day she died. Jessy claimed that when she visited Lynn that morning, Jessy knew that Lynn had poured 6 bottles of Visine into her own water bottle.
That bottle of water right there had in 6 Visines. I didn't put it in. I gave her the bottle of water.
Which is the one you know has 6 bottles of Visine in it. Because she told you. And you give it to her.
Well, we argued about it.
Jessy said she spent 10 minutes trying to stop Lynn.
She said, no, I want that bottle of water. It'll put me to sleep.
And then you gave in.
Yep, it's her choice and what she wanted.
And then you left.
Yep.
Hours later, detectives alleged Jessy opened that JCPenney card in Lynn's name and went grocery shopping.
I didn't do it to her, though. I didn't.
Well, Jessy?
It would be 23 months later that Jessy Kurczewski was charged with Lynn's death.
Does the state have any other witnesses to call?
No, the state rests.
When it was the defense's turn, Jessy's attorneys focused almost solely on their claim that Lynn died by suicide by drinking Visine.
We would call Gary Verdon.
Verdon, a friend of Jessy's mother,
Call her Jenny or Jennifer.
I call her Jenny.
said he'd been in Lynn's condo twice, the second time about a year before her death. Yet his memory of the visit was clear.
I saw him always sitting in his chair with a table next to her. She had a white Slurpee cup with a straw coming out of it. She had a bottle of vodka next to it. She had an ashtray, her cigarettes, and a bottle of Visine.
You sure it's Visine?
Yes.
Verdon testified that on another occasion, he heard Lynn on speakerphone when he visited Jessy's mother, Jennifer.
Well, Lynn just started rambling off, and she was either sleepy or tired or whatever. And she was rattling off about the will. Then she started talking about how she wanted to kill herself.
Defense calls Sarah Trump.
Sarah Trump is a nurse practitioner who began treating Lynn for back pain in 2017. Despite prescribing several pain medications for her, Trump said Lynn did not improve.
In 2018, January, she continues to complain about her back pain.
Yes.
The pain being worsening, correct?
Yes.
Forensic pathologist Dr. Lindsay Thomas was hired by the defense.
I would say her past medical history was very significant. She had a very long list of medical conditions and also had quite a few psychiatric disorders: depression, anxiety, agoraphobia, which is fear of public places, chronic insomnia. Those were the ones that were listed in her medical records.
Dr. Thomas testified she agreed with the state's conclusion that Lynn's medical problems contributed to her death. She did not agree with the state's finding that Lynn died from tetrahydrozoline poisoning.
The forensic pathologist that the defense brought up said that Lynn's cause of death was undetermined, but she believed it was mixed drug toxicity. And so that means she thought that it was a combination of all of the drugs found in Lynn's system.
Would you say that there is strong evidence here that Lynn Hernan's death was a suicide?
I would say there's strong evidence that certainly could have been a suicide, yes.
As the defense concluded, Judge Jennifer Duro asked Jessy if she'd be taking the stand.
What is that decision?
It was very hard for me to decide, but ultimately I will not be testifying.
Madam Reporter, you're...
In her closing argument,
Ms. Kurczewski's intent is clear. It was to kill.
Deputy District Attorney Abby Nicolai said Jessy had just one motive: money.
And the motive is her own personal benefit. This is someone who has profited over $144,000 before death and over $80,000 after.
In her closing,
The state has not proven a first-degree intentional homicide.
defense attorney Donna Kukler maintained that Lynn took her own life.
Jessy knew that Lynn would take Visine, drink it, but she doesn't know how she died that day. Looked like a suicide with pills from a person who was unhappy.
As for the allegations that Jessy stole from Lynn,
Lynn gave Jessy money all the time because she wanted to.
the defense contended that Lynn gave Jessy the money because Lynn knew she was going to end her own life.
She wanted Jessy to have it. She knows she's going out, and Lynn made a decision. She made a decision that she was going to exit. And she did that on October 3rd, once Jessy had left the home.
Attorney Nicolai, when you're ready.
In its rebuttal, the prosecution pushed back.
To believe that this was a suicide, you would have to believe that by the most cosmic intervention in the entire world, it happened at the exact point in time when Ms. Kurczewski maximized the amount of money that she made on this whole ordeal.
The jury deliberated for 7 hours the first day, but did not reach a verdict.
Verdict watch for this case was tense. When the jury began to deliberate into a second day, there was some wonder.
That's when I got worried. I was wondering what, I'm like, what's the hold up?
Go behind the scenes with the 48 Hours Post-Mortem podcast.
Madam Foreperson, has the jury reached their verdicts?
Yes, Your Honor.
On November 14th of 2023, after 10.5 hours of deliberation, Jessy Kurczewski steadied herself as Judge Jennifer Doro read the jury's verdicts.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Jessy R. Kurczewski, guilty of first-degree intentional homicide.
Jessy broke down as the judge continued.
Jessy was crying uncontrollably.
Kurczewski was also convicted on the 2 counts of felony theft for stealing money from Lynn before and after she died.
I was just overcome with emotion. It also makes you reflect on the last 5 years with the lies and the deceit.
But before sentencing, the case took a bizarre turn when an envelope containing 37 pages of these handwritten letters and documents was received by a friend of Jessy's, who then turned it over to the sheriff's department.
The letter requests a friend of Jessy to fake evidence, create a voice recording, pretending to be Lynn Hernan, to send all of this to the judge in this case, to local media, even to the governor, to try to prove Jessy's innocence.
Prosecutors said the documents were written by Kurczewski on the back of her trial notes, giving directions to her friend on how to impersonate Lynn and fabricate materials and submit them to the court. Kurczewski allegedly asked her friend to, quote, make a voice tape pretending to be Lynn, writing, she has an older, raspy female voice. Kurczewski allegedly directed her friend to say, quote, I cannot go on anymore. I chose to drink Visine and end my life. Jessy denied writing the documents, and the sheriff's department began an investigation into their origin. And the results of that investigation were revealed on April 5th, 2024, when Kurczewski was back in Judge Doro's court for sentencing.
All right.
Prosecutors played video recorded in Kurczewski's bunk room at the Waukesha County Jail, a few days before those documents were turned over to authorities.
So what I'm playing is jail video from Ms. Kurczewski's pod.
They said it showed Kurczewski putting papers into an envelope, leaving it on the bed of another inmate who later takes it to a mail drop-off. The prosecution said this proved Kurczewski wrote those documents.
Ms. Kurczewski, this is your opportunity to address the court. What, if anything, would you like to say?
Kurczewski again denied she was the author of those documents. She spent almost 2 hours without a break proclaiming her innocence, insisting the only thing she was guilty of was being a loyal friend.
Let's be very clear here. There was no murder. I did not commit murder. I did not poison Lynn, give her pills, or anything else. It is a lot to be accused and convicted of murder when I didn't do it. You're holding me responsible for what she did.
Judge Doro said she believed Lynn's death was premeditated.
Tetrahydrozoline was not something we expected to find. And I do believe it was something you, Ms. Kurczewski, banked on no one testing for. I have to ask out loud. It's a rhetorical question, but were you poisoning Lynn Hernan all along?
following your release from prison?
No.
I'm not asking for an answer. This is my time. So do not interrupt me.
Kurczewski was sentenced to life in prison on the intentional homicide charge and 10 years for the 2 theft charges. The soonest she could be paroled would be after 40 years, when she would be nearly 80 years old.
Jessy poisoned Lynn like she was a rodent.
Lynn Hernan's friend, Jim Kelleher, had a few final words for Lynn's killer.
The devil awaits you. I hope you rot in hell. Lynn Hernan is an angel in heaven. May you rest in peace, Lynn. You're dearly missed and always will be. I'm so very sorry. God bless.
A beautiful heart, a gentle, gentle spirit.
A woman found dying from a gunshot wound. Crime scene evidence that doesn't add up.
There's definitely mysteries involved in this case.
Then prosecutors take a creative approach.
A psychological autopsy.
48 Hours, Saturday on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Post-mortem. I'm your host, Anne-Marie Green, and today we are talking about the homicide of Lynn Hernan, who was poisoned with a really unusual substance, one that the medical examiner said she had never seen pop up in a toxicology report before. So joining me today are a CBS News correspondent, Jericka Duncan, and 48 Hours producers, Susan Mallie and Lauren Clark, who reported and produced this episode. Welcome, everyone.
So good to be here. Thanks for having us.
Hi, Anne-Marie. So listen, if you haven't listened to the hour yet, or you need a refresher, why don't you head on over to the podcast feed to check out the showcast and then come back here because we're going to take a deep dive. One of the most interesting parts of this case was how prosecutors say Lynn was killed. They believe that Jessy Kurczewski poisoned Lynn Hernan with eye drops. Jericka, I had never heard of this before. Have you heard of this before?
So interestingly enough, I do remember seeing a piece that Peter Van Zandt did on a gentleman named Steve Clayton. And essentially, he was poisoned by tetrahydrozoline, which is a substance that's found in eye drops commonly. And it's very bizarre. I think I have heard it in the context of people worried about it being used as like a date rape drug. You know, this idea when you go to a bar, you don't leave your glass or anything unattended and come back to it. But I hadn't heard it in this way. And because it's a slow progression in terms of some of the symptoms or how one would feel, you may not even know what's happening. And that's also what's so weird and scary about how all of this unfolded.
Typically, this is something that you would never even think would be ingested. Obviously, in the directions, it would say for topical use only in your eyes. And there are poison warnings on most over-the-counter eye drops, which is certainly what was used here. And to Jericka's point, it generally depresses the central nervous system. It can make one less aware and kind of out of it. But when used in large quantities, it can be lethal.
Now, Kurczewski claims that Lynn wanted to kill herself because of her deteriorating health. Susan and Lauren, when you first started reporting this case, how believable did you find Kurczewski's story that Lynn intentionally poisoned herself by drinking Visine?
Suicide is a difficult topic for any of us to discuss. But the fact of the matter is we have to come in with an open mind. And we have to look at both sides, the prosecution and the defense. I cannot come in and think, oh, well, if she was accused of something, she must have done it. Mm-hmm. Plenty of people do think that, but it is our job to not do that. When I first came onto the story, the trial was still in progress. The trial had kicked off in October of 23. The first thing I said, well, how sick was she? And then you kind of go into the medical history, and then you try to develop a character study of, was she depressed? Could she have been at the point where she wanted to die by suicide? That is what the first responders thought, which is an important fact here. When they arrived at the death scene, that was their first impression. And so I have to give weight to that as well.
Because that scene definitely played out as something that maybe someone was depressed or OD'd or, took too many pills. The pill bottles were there. They were crushed up, powder. So you look at it initially, you know that this woman didn't have a lot of people in her life. She was the only child. Her parents had died. Again, their job at that moment is just kind of looking at what the evidence that is there to try to discern what may have happened. But it's in the toxicology that really is allowing us to take more of a microscopic look. And then when you look at those levels and you realize they're not normal, it definitely raises more questions. Then you look at financial records and there's more questions.
Yeah. And so another question that I had was, Jessy Kurczewski, did she start helping Lynn out because she cared for her, or was this a hustle from the very beginning?
I think that's a great question. And it was one of the questions that I had. Was this always a grift? And unfortunately, there is no way for us to know the answer for sure. We know that Kurczewski's mother was very good friends with Lynn from back in the 80s. Jessy grew up from the time she was a little girl knowing her as Aunt Linny, and they had a tight friendship. As you also know from watching the show, Kurczewski had a record for identity theft and forgery. She got out of prison in 2016, which coincided with the time that Lynn's health, already having problems, began to sharply decline. Jessy Kurczewski was never charged with poisoning Lynn at any point before October 3rd, 2018. She was charged with homicide for that day for Lynn Hernan's death. So as we discuss about potentially her health issues and her steady decline, we do so because at the sentencing, the judge gave a very lengthy statement in which she, the judge, Jennifer Doro, said, "I cannot help but wonder if you had been poisoning her all along." And this was the judge saying that on the record after having listened to all the testimony of several weeks of trial.
So do we know whether or not she had been ingesting this stuff all along?
We really don't know. I mean, Lynn had other health issues, especially in the last few years of her life. She had a lot of back pain. She had a lot of gastrointestinal issues. And it was something she would go to the hospital for. They would run some tests. She didn't always want certain tests to be run. So they could never really fully figure out what the source of those gastrointestinal issues were. Tetrahydrozoline is not something that's usually tested for in a hospital setting. When you get your regular blood panel, that's usually not on there because most people don't ingest it. So we really don't know how long she had possibly been ingesting it for.
There was absolutely no way to go back in time and in any way try to find out if that is the case. But it is something the judge said on the record, so that's why we're discussing it.
What was particularly heartbreaking about this case and about Kurczewski's behavior and that she targeted Lynn is that she seemed so close to her. Lynn trusted her. She treated her like a daughter. And even though, Jericka, you said she didn't have a lot of people around her, it seemed like the people that she did have around her really, really cared for her. And so why kill her?
We don't really know to this day. I mean, I feel like only Jessy Kurczewski really, truly understands the depths of whatever she was thinking. And, even right now, she will tell you she didn't do it. She still believes that the prosecutors got it wrong, police got it wrong, but never really offered up explanation about why certain things that were found didn't add up. The friends of Lynn were her family. And I think because she was so isolated from the world, if you will, this wasn't someone that was a member of this group and that group and worked here. And she kind of kept a very close, tight circle, which does in some ways, as you pointed out, make you a target when you're vulnerable. And, you live alone and people need people.
Right. So this 48 hours was put together a little differently because it started with the trial, and normally it doesn't. Why did you all choose to tell the story in this way?
So, for lack of a better word, this was a good trial. And anybody who follows true crime or follows, hopefully, 48 Hours loyally, not all trials are as exciting as you would hope they would be. Sometimes they really are, like watching paint dry. So we wanted to give the viewer the opportunity to be the 13th juror, to sit there and listen to the testimony and view the evidence in the order that the jury did. We're going to start at the beginning, and we're going to take you through this. Now, obviously, we have time constraints. This trial lasted for weeks, so we have to condense it and make some tough choices about what to include and what to leave out. But to the credit of my wonderful staff and my correspondent to my right, we picked the best of the best. And we tried to give a fair shake to both sides. And it was because the trial was just so fascinating. First of all, you had a true quandary as to whether this was homicide or suicide going in. Secondly, you had people on both sides of the aisle with valid things to say about Lynn Hernan's health and mental status. And thirdly, you had Kurczewski herself, who did not testify at her own trial, but you had these hours and hours of interrogations where the jury got to hear her talk and basically represent herself and her side of the story to the jury without intending to do it.
One of the red flags always is, if you're a 48 Hours fan, red flag is when a suspect goes through multiple interrogations and they change their story. And that is definitely something that we saw with Kurczewski. She talked to detectives several times. She seemed very open to talking, but then she started changing her story. What did the defense say about that? How did they explain that?
They honestly never really addressed that directly in the trial. I love that you brought that up because there was a preponderance of recordings of those interrogations, which happened over several days of Kurczewski. And there's two things to point out. One is that she never asked for an attorney. And two, she kept asking to go back and speak to the detectives again and again, day after day. And I will tell you, having worked at the show for over 2 decades, you never see that. Usually when someone's brought in, they sit there with hunched shoulders. You can barely understand what they're saying. They respond in one-word answers. And usually they ask for an attorney. And that's the end of it. This was so striking to me because Kurczewski came in and she was downright buoyant. She was peppy and joking with the guys and very seemingly forthcoming. And really just was her attitude was one, I guess we were supposed to assume, of innocence.
Mm-hmm.
And then as the days went on, as you said, her story began to change. And she would augment what she was saying clearly by what she thought they wanted to hear. And she would give out a little more information and a little more information, but it was always disinformation. It was always a redirect. And you can just see her thinking on her feet. Like, what am I going to say next? And how, okay, I've said this thing, but now I have to alter it a little bit to get over here. And it's just an incredible study in how her mind worked.
Welcome back. So we see a lot of footage from these police interrogations during the hour, but what we didn't see was some of the other evidence of Kurczewski's financial crimes presented at trial, like a recorded phone call that she made to a banking institution, basically impersonating Lynn. Let's listen to some of the audio of that call that was not included in the episode.
My name is. How can I help you today?
Yes, I'm calling. I use my mobile online app, and I'm trying to go under the regular online app, and I am not sure what I had originally set my 3 security questions up under. I know one of them for sure. I can't remember the other 2, and I'm trying to log on, and I'm having an issue with it.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear about this. Let me just check what I can best do here for you. And don't you worry, we'll definitely fix this problem before we end this call. So, sure. Could you please verify your complete name exactly as it appears on your preferred MasterCard? I'm sorry?
Lynn A. Hernan.
Thank you, Ms. Hernan. Do you have your card handy?
I do.
Lauren, I want to hear the
No.
rest of that phone call. I want to find out if she was successful at all. Do you know, did her voice sound particularly different than how she normally talks?
It does sound like she's talking a little slower. What's interesting is, this call was made while Lynn was still alive. There are a couple of calls from that day where allegedly Jessy is calling this financial institution saying, I can't remember my password. I'm having trouble with the online account, or I usually use this way, and this way it's just not working. And it goes on. There were, like I said, several recordings on 2 separate occasions while she was trying to gain access to these accounts.
And the other thing we knew from talking to her friends is that Lynn just was not someone that would go online, to use the app. She didn't have a smartphone. She was old school. So this idea that she's asking questions about something that would force her to use a smartphone or be on a computer didn't quite make sense according to her friends. This was someone that would physically go to the financial institution to handle business.
Well, what I kept on wondering is Kurczewski has access to these bank accounts. She's got a regular stream of money coming in. Why would you end this gravy train? It seemed like she was doing fine with Lynn alive.
I think what prosecutors alleged was that the gravy train was running out. Lynn's money was kind of used up. Her credit was damaged. There wasn't much more to take from Lynn in life, but Lynn did have some assets. She owned her condo. And our wonderful broadcast associate, Mariah Johnson, found a Facebook post where Jessy had posted in just weeks after Lynn's death, trying to clear out her condo for sale. And, it's down to the pots and pans, writing, "Make me an offer." Lynn's friends alleged that she was trying to just sell anything that she could make money on.
Well, according to a court filing, Kurczewski tried to pawn some of her more valuable items. It was a gold bracelet. Again, it speaks to this level of greed, maybe is the right word, to get what she could early on. And again, we don't know how we'll deal with different things and situations until we're actually in them. But it's hard to really wrap your head around, especially when you wouldn't do something like that.
Right. So I want to bring up some of these other things that didn't make it into the hour because they're fascinating. What's this business about exonerating evidence?
So yeah, we couldn't really have time to get into this fully in the hour because it takes a lot of explanation. But basically, while Jessy was in custody during the investigation, she claimed that there existed exonerating evidence out there that proved that Lynn had wanted to take her own life for a while and had left notes, and that she'd even left a voice recording. And she told the investigators that these were buried in a public park, and if they would just let her go, she could take them there and she would show them where it was all buried. Now, the sheriff's office did not let her go to the park. What they did is they set up basically a video call where they had deputies out in this park searching around with Jessy in the interview room, kind of guiding them. They're out there with shovels. They're going through like brush, and she's, just kind of like, this looks different. I don't know, was that bush really there? That looks so overgrown. And it goes on for a while. And I'm sure you're going to be shocked to hear they did not find anything.
Wow. So on November 14th, 2023, the jury found Kurczewski guilty of first-degree intentional homicide and 2 counts of felony theft. But then, before she's sentenced, there's this huge twist because it's 48 hours. So, of course, there's a twist. A friend of Kurczewski's turns in an envelope containing 37 handwritten letters and documents, and they direct the friend to create various pieces of evidence, including a voice recording pretending to be Lynn. It almost felt to me like if you wanted to fake a suicide, but you forgot the suicide note and you were trying to backtrack. But what did you guys think?
When we found out, we were all ready to cover the sentencing hearing. We had travel booked for someone to be there. We had crews ready. We were going to do interviews after because people could finally talk to us. And then a week before that sentencing date was on the calendar, we started to see these unusual filings put in the court record. And the 48 Hours team was kind of like, what are these? And then we got through these documents and we were all individually reading them at the same time and texting and messaging each other being like, what is this? It was surprising to see pop up, and we kind of had to unravel what they meant. But I just can't overstate how bizarre it was to see these pop up after a conviction had already gone through.
And then on top of it, in the letter, she basically throws her lawyers under the bus, right? Prosecutors allege that Kurczewski said that it was one of her own attorneys that gave her the idea. It was their idea to write those directions to her friend. Now, her attorney then has to file a motion to be removed from the case, citing ethical concerns. And prosecutors don't believe that her attorneys actually had anything to do with this, but obviously it complicates things. This leads to a delay in the sentencing, and now she needs to find new attorneys. But finally, the sentencing takes place, and the judge sentences Kurczewski to life in prison. What was the reaction like in the courtroom?
I think people became fatigued because the first thing that we need to talk about in the sentencing is that it went on for 6.5 hours. And I had mentioned earlier, I've been at 48 for a long time, 24 years to be exact. I've sat in and watched online a lot of sentencings. This sentencing began on April 5th, 2024 at 9 a.m. Central Time, so 10 a.m. here in New York, where I was watching it online. And I thought, I'm going to be done by lunch. I was not done by lunch. There were a few brief victim impact statements from some of the folks that you've met on our own show. There were a few statements on behalf of Kurczewski. And then the judge gave the floor to Kurczewski herself. And what I could not have known is that she had in front of her on the defense table a pile of papers, which she had written out longhand. And she spoke for 2 hours straight, without a break, took a sip of water every now and then. Of course, she claimed innocence. Of course, she claimed that Lynn had died by suicide. She went into great detail about her friendship with Lynn. She gave vignettes from her childhood. It went on for so long that the judge then had to break for a 90-minute lunch break because everybody just needed to kind of compose themselves and get it together. And of course, the judge was then going to come back and pronounce sentence. But before she did, she gave a statement, and we've talked about this earlier, that she wondered if, in fact, Ms. Kurczewski had been poisoning Lynn all along. But the judge gave great detail as to why she gave such a lengthy sentence. Kurczewski is going to be nearly 80 years old by the time that she's even eligible for parole. And the judge, she actually had a target age that she iterated from the bench, that I want you to be in there till your 80s. She got 10 years for the 2 financial charges. And she was sentenced to life with the possibility of parole after 30 for the homicide.
I'm sure she's going to try to appeal and do whatever she can to make sure she gets out before she's 80 years old. But there are people that we've all, I feel like, covered who will say to the bitter end, I didn't do it. I didn't do it. And you're wrong.
It must have been infuriating for some of Lynn's friends to listen to Kurczewski on the stand, having given up her opportunity to testify during the trial, to then speak on behalf of their friend, their dead friend who they loved. I mean, did you get a chance to talk to any of the friends about that 2-hour sentencing statement?
Our field producer in the field, Charlotte Fuller, was there at the sentencing hearing, and she talked to several of Lynn's other friends. Afterward, there was a brief press conference that they also gave. They didn't really want to react to Jessy Kurczewski's statement. They want to focus on Lynn. They want to focus on who their friend Lynn Hernon was. They say they have gone through a lot of drama over the last 5 years and hearing a lot of different stories that evolved over time, and they've had to keep up with a lot, and they are done. They want to remember Lynn as they knew her, as they loved her. They want to find ways to honor her, and they don't want to focus on Jessy Kurczewski.
If I took away anything personal from this story, I was kind of struck by the fact that Lynn is an only child and both of her parents have passed away, because I'm an only child and both my parents are alive, but my father is also an only child and I have an only child. And I've seen relatives become very sick and their circle becomes smaller and smaller. I thought to myself, if there's one thing to remember, that the people who love you, They want to surround you. They want to support you. And when you make your circle that small, you can also make yourself very vulnerable to someone who could take advantage.
Very well said. I mean, we do these stories obviously because there's an element of interest and wow and oh my goodness. But when you can see yourself in some of these very people that we do stories on, I think it really hits home.
Jericka, Susan, Lauren, this has been great talking to you and a great 48 hours. As usual, thank you so much.
Yes, this pleasure is all mine.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you.
All right, everyone, join us next Tuesday for another Postmortem and watch 48 Hours on Saturdays, 10, 9 Central on CBS, and of course, streaming on Paramount+. And if you are liking the show, please rate and review 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts and follow 48 Hours wherever you get your podcasts. You can also listen ad-free on the Amazon Music and Wondery app or with a 48 Hours Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts.